We're brought here today by the love that Sarah and Davis share for each other.
We're going to be so happy.
We'll be so happy, and I'm gonna crush it at being a husband. Happy anniversary, babe.
Great idea coming here.
It's been an amazing year.
It sure has.
Wait, you do gifts on your anniversary? Why did nobody tell me this?
Did he forget my gift?
Quick, say something.
I also ordered you a gift. It has not gotten here yet.
I have a feeling I know what it is. I mean, I've been hinting pretty heavily.
Absolutely no idea.
So, there's been something I've been wanting to talk to you about.
Uh-oh. She caught me using the decorative soaps again.
Have you, thought about us having a baby?
Kids, we just got married. Are you serious? I can't create a human.
Yep, he's totally freaking out right now.
Crying, mess, noise, poop, lots of poop.
Honey.
Yes. What? I'm ready to think about having the
Why
conversation.
don't you open your gift?
Okay.
What?
We made a baby.
You're pregnant.
Yeah, I'm so pregnant.
Oh, like how much?
Like 100%.
Oh.
Like all the way pregnant.
It's gonna be a boy. He's gonna be awesome. He's gonna play football.
It's gonna be a girl. She's gonna be my best friend.
I'm gonna teach him how to build stuff,
She's gonna do ballet,
throw stuff,
shopping,
break stuff,
theater,
burn stuff.
mommy's little princess.
He's gonna be my little buddy.
We're having a baby.
Oh my gosh. Yes.
We're gonna crush parenting.
I'm gonna crush it at being a dad.
Cheers.
Yeah, this is gonna need to be decaf,
Is that
if you don't mind.
a pregnant thing?
Anybody else missed an anniversary gift to use that line? Only me? What? I don't know about you, but I'm certainly going to miss that couple. I've certainly enjoyed watching their, things that happen and the awkwardness. I heard someone last week. I don't know if you were here last week. You heard someone in the back corner shrieking. It was so funny last week. So if you missed that, you can go catch up online. We've been in the series. We're wrapping up the series today, and we're really asking the question: well, what do happy couples know, right? What do happy couples know? And we've discovered over the last couple of weeks that they know a couple of things. And what's interesting about a relationship, and it's inevitable, it's unavoidable really, each and every one of us, we bring a box of hopes, dreams, and desires into a relationship. That we come in with these hopes, these dreams, and desires, and at some point, they transfer to the other person, and they become expectations. That they become these hopes, dreams, and desires that are mine, and they end up getting given to someone who feels like a weight. It feels like something that is heavy, a burden for someone else. They begin to feel like expectations. And so over the last couple of weeks, we've kind of had a look at, hey, what do happy couples ultimately know? And the first thing that we looked at in week one was this idea that they have a decision to make. They decide, happy couples decide, they owe each other everything, but are owed nothing in return. And that doesn't make a lot of sense, right? But if you go and you spend time with a happy couple, if you spend time around a couple that is expressing, happiness, and they seem to just have it all together, and they're, that translates to how they're living their lives as well, that they live a life where they're like, hey, you owe me nothing, but I owe you everything in return. You owe me nothing in this relationship, but I owe you absolutely everything in this relationship. The second thing we discovered together is that we looked at what the Apostle Paul had to say, and we looked at this verse that really comes down to, hey, marriage and a Christian relationship is really about getting to the back of the line, right? That it's about what we termed a submission competition. That it is where two people are kind of, hey, I owe you everything, and so I'm just going to step back and, hey, if that's what you want, if that's what you desire, then, hey, I'm going to support you in that. I'm going to submit to you as you move in this. It's a complete submission competition that we're going to try and out-submit one another, and it's an amazing, amazing thing to be able to watch as a couple do this. The third thing that we had to look at last week was we recognized that happy couples, sometimes you need to throw things. Now, before you go home and literally throw something at your spouse or your partner, please go back and listen to last week, because there's a very specific application that has nothing to do with actually throwing a physical object at your partner. So go back onto our website or onto YouTube and go and have a look at part 3, where sometimes we just have to throw some things around. And today, we're going to be diving into the fourth thing that happy couples know, and that happy couples know this, that they have a choice. Now, it's a very interesting choice, because this choice that we're going to talk about today is something that every coupled person, everyone who's in a relationship, every single in a relationship, they're coupled, every coupled person makes. It's a decision they make every single day. And the issue with this decision, this choice that they get to make, is that it feels sometimes more like a reaction. That when they're in this situation and this happens, that it's more of a reaction. It's a response to something that happens than it is a decision. But the truth is, we have this decision, we're making this decision, whether we're aware of it or not. And it feels more like a reaction from time to time. But most people don't think that they have a choice in this. Some people just go through life and they feel like they do not have a choice when it comes to this, when in actual fact, they do. Happy couples make what we're going to call the happy choice. They make the happy choice. So, what is the choice that coupled people make every single day that they don't know that they're making, that they are actually, in fact, allowed to make in a relationship? I'm so glad you're asking that question, because that's what we're going to talk about for the next 30 or 40 minutes. It's going to be wonderful. One of the things that the Apostle Paul does for us, and if you don't know anything about Paul, Paul started out as a Christian hater, has this encounter with God, and never actually met Jesus, which is really interesting. And he ends up being one of the most prominent church planters that we know about in the early first century. And he's just a phenomenal guy if you go and read about him. And everything that he does is amazing, because he takes all these ideas of Jesus, and all he does is he applies them. He doesn't necessarily come up with anything new. He doesn't come up with new theology. He just takes what Jesus says and says, hey, this is what you're supposed to do in this situation. This is what you're supposed to do in this situation. And what was interesting is Paul rocks up on the scene in early first century, and there's this whole group of people who are pagans, and they're converting to Christianity. So the Gentiles, they're not Jewish people. They haven't been raised as Jewish. They've been raised in a pagan world, and there's a whole bunch of things that come along with that. And so they're converting to Christianity, a whole bunch of Gentiles converting to Christianity. They're trying to figure out, hey, how does this whole pagan thing and Christianity work together? And, Paul's introducing this idea, hey, there's this one God. But they're like, hey, what am I supposed to do with all these other gods that I grew up believing in? Like, what am I supposed to do with those things? They kind of come to this point of hey, it's all about my relationship with God. Like, I have to have this thing perfectly fine. I have to be right with God, and God's going to be, everything in the world's going to be okay. And Paul comes along and says, no, that's not what is supposed to happen. There's supposed to be this other idea. There's this thing on the outside that he introduces this idea that God, in fact, cares for you. Now, as a pagan person, you or a Gentile, you would have grown up believing in all these gods, and in fact, none of these gods cared for you. In fact, the only way you got to get the gods to do your bidding was, in fact, do things for the gods. You would make sacrifices. You would sacrifice crop. You would sacrifice some things that are precious to you. You would sacrifice animals. You would, in some instances, sacrifice children, because you would do whatever it took to make sure that the gods were happy with you. If you had a bad crop this year, hey, what did you do before we planted? We're not doing that again, okay? We need to do, hey, Joe, what did you do that made our crop grow? Okay, we're going to go do that. I'm going to go sacrifice an animal because that seemed to get you a good crop. They were doing anything they could to try and make sure that the gods were happy with them, that they were in right standing with God. In fact, the gods never cared about people. They would torment people. They would torture people. In some instances, and maybe you remember some of these myths from school, they in fact mated with humans so that they could create these demigods that walked around the earth. The gods, they didn't take any care of people. And Paul rocks up and says, this one God, forget about all the other gods. You can have those gods if you want. That's fine. But this one God that I'm introducing you to, this one God is in fact, he actually cares about you. He loves you. And he wants you to follow his son, Jesus. And so Paul comes along and introduces this idea that Jesus really introduced for the first time. He said, hey, there's this idea of vertical morality, that there is this idea that, hey, it doesn't really matter about the people around me. As long as I'm right with God, then it's okay. As long as I'm doing what I need to do to make sure that my relationship with God is fine, then that's okay. And Paul and Jesus come along and say, no. It's not about this. It's about this. It's about horizontal morality. It's about how you're loving the people around you. It's how you're loving your neighbor, how you're treating your spouse, how you're treating the people in your life. That is, in fact, a higher devotion. It shows a higher devotion to God, to your love for God, than just making sure that you're doing all the rituals and the rites and everything that's going on. That there is no longer this idea of vertical morality, that if we're good with God, then that's all that matters. No. It's about, hey, I've got to be right with the people around me. I've got to be loving the people around me. And God comes and sends his son, Jesus, into the world and dies for each and every one of us. And it's an invitation for you and for me to be able to love the people around us. That even when we deserved it, God sent his son to die for you and for me. And we're meant to do that for other people as well. We're meant to give those people around us what they don't deserve sometimes as well. And so I'm going to read a very familiar chapter to some of you. We're going to read some of what Paul's writings was. Paul, in fact, wrote a whole bunch of letters. One of them was Corinthians. There were, in fact, 3 letters to begin with. We can't find the third one. There's some pieces of it, but we don't have enough of it to prove that it's a legitimate document. And so we've only ended up with 2 letters to the Corinthians, the church in Corinth. And Paul comes along and he writes in this first one, and he's just finished explaining to the people, these pagans, these ex-pagans who become Christians, this Gentile group that has become Christians, hey, there's all these other gods and all this kind of stuff. But hey, that's okay. But this is what I'm trying to tell you. I'm trying to tell you what this is in fact like. Now, the piece I'm about to read to you is often referred to as the love chapter. In fact, some of you maybe had this at your wedding. Maybe you read this as part of your vows. But when we read it in the English language, it makes great wedding literature. But when you read it in the original Greek and what Paul was intending it for it to be, it's not necessarily the great piece of literature to be able to read at a wedding. Because it's earthy, it's gritty, it's kind of trying to push these people in the direction of saying, hey, that is the way you used to live, but this is how you're supposed to live. And Paul makes this really some interesting statements inside. In fact, one of them doesn't make sense at all. In fact, when you read it, you just glance through it. You just move past it. But we're going to spend a little bit of time on it, and you're going to realize that doesn't actually make sense. If you take all the groupings together, this one stands out as like alone. And we're going to spend a little bit of time there. I'm going to read through everything, and then I'll come back to this in just a little bit. But in the sentence that doesn't make sense is the very secret to what happy couples know. So with all of that, are you ready? One person on the front row. Thank you. Rest of you ready? Here we go. If I speak in the tongues of men or of angels, but do not have love, I am only a resounding gong or a clanging cymbal. Now, in the pagan religion, one of the things they would try to do is they would walk around as kind of like a way to show themselves. They would speak in the language of angels. And I don't know, I've never met anyone who can speak in the language of angels, but if these people could walk around, if you could, prove that you were speaking in the language of angels, you were like, something else. Everyone respected you, everyone looked at you, and some of the priests did this and spoke in a language and called it the language of angels. This was just, some of the manipulation that they did in the first century. But, if Paul's basically saying, hey, if you walk around and you say, if I can speak in the tongues of angels, if you can actually do that, but you do not have love, you're just a bunch of noise. Which is interesting, and it's just it should be a reminder to you and to me that you should never judge someone who has a microphone on their face, a teacher, a preacher, someone who is maybe speaking in an environment. Do not ever judge them based on what they say or the ability that they have. Okay, because this is a learned skill. 6 years ago, I couldn't speak like this. This is a learned skill. Just like you learn a skill, just like you learn an ability, you should never judge me or someone like me who has a microphone as a teacher or preacher based on what they in fact do as their ability. Because you can learn an ability. I can learn an ability. I can learn a talent. I can develop a talent. If you want to know who I'm like, what I'm like as a Christian, you ask my wife. You ask my kids. You ask the people around me. Because if I'm just speaking, it's a lot of noise. But if I don't have love, it's actually just nothing. Paul carries on and says, if I have the gift of prophecy, in other words, I can tell everything of the future, and can fathom all mysteries and all knowledge. In other words, I'm the smartest person in the room. I can answer any one of your questions, right? And if I have faith that can move mountains, like whatever that is, if I have perfect faith, I could move mountains. If I have all of those things, but I do not have love, I am nothing. And if you take this back to the Greek, it literally, Paul's basically saying, hey, if I am the smartest person in the room, and I can answer every single question, I know how these molecules work together, I know how creation happened, I know everything, but I do not have love, the Greek translation says, I'm literally a nobody. I do not exist. And Paul's reminding us, hey, knowledge does not equal deep. Okay? Knowledge, head knowledge, knowing what is going on. Knowledge does not equal deep. It does not equal a deep connection with God. Deep does not equal love, and we need to remember that. Paul carries on and says, if I give all I possess to the poor, in other words, not 10%, not 20%, I don't know anyone who's given everything, but give everything I possess over to the poor, and then I give over my body to hardship that I might boast. In other words, I've given everything away, and I'm like, oh my gosh, I could do something more. What more can I do? I've got nothing else to give. I'm going to give my body over. I'm going to sell my body into slavery. I'm going to go work that I might boast about everything I've given away. But do not have love, I gain nothing. There's so much going on in this verse, okay? But one of the things that, this is maybe a message for another day, but the whole prosperity gospel thing, this is kind of the nail in the coffin for the prosperity gospel. Because anybody who gives to get, gets nothing from God. Anybody who gives something in order to get from God, gets nothing from God. Okay? Anybody who gives something, you giving because God's going to give you something else, you get nothing from God. This is a message for another day. But in this thing, he keeps saying this word, have love, this phrase, have love. Like, well, what is that? What is have love? If I were to do a survey here today and I went around and we said, hey, who has love? Everyone's going to go, I have love, right? We all have love. I have compassion for my neighbor. I have empathy for the people around me. I love my neighbor. I have love. I certainly have love, right? I mean, it makes it sound like an internal thing, right? Like it's a feeling we have, like it's something that happens on the inside, that I have compassion and empathy, and I have love. I surely have love. But Paul wants to make it very clear to you and very clear to me and very clear to his first century audience that it's not necessarily about this thing that's happening inside of me. It's about something that's happening on the outside. It's a verb. It's a thing that we do. It's something physical that happens on the outside. Love is something that we can show towards other people. And he launches into what is very familiar for us. He says, love is patient. In other words, it's kind of like, hey, I'm gonna wait. I'm going to put my needs at the back of the line, right? I'm going to wait for what is in fact going on. Love is kind. That I'm going to serve this other person. That, in fact, I think it says love defers is another translation. That I know what I'm going to let you do what you do. I'm going to defer to you. I'm going to be kind towards you. It does not envy. It does not boast. In other words, hey, if you're the life of the party, I'm not going to come in and go, oh, did you hear that? Oh, I've got a better story, right? I'm going to come one up you, right? That's not what this is about. I'm going to let you have center stage. I'm going to let you be the hero today because I want to support you in that. I'm not going to be jealous of you. I'm not going to try to one-up you all the time. I don't want to be envious. Love is not boastful. It is not proud. He carries on and says, love does not dishonor others. In other words, if I do something that's dishonoring to you, I'm not going to do that. That's not love. If I do something that's dishonoring to you, that's in fact a sin. Like I'm not going to do something that hurts you or dishonors you. If I have something that's dishonoring in my life, I'm going to put that aside. I'm not going to dishonor other people. It's not self-seeking, the whole idea of submission again, right? Getting to the back of the line. It's not easily angered. In other words, it doesn't have a temper, right? And it keeps no record of wrongs. I don't know anyone who doesn't keep a record of wrongs. But wouldn't we all want a relationship like that? Wouldn't we all want a relationship where there's no record of wrongs kept about what we have done in our lives? Then he launches into this phrase that we're going to come back and look at in just a little bit. It's a little tricky. He says this, love does not delight in evil, but rejoices with the truth. And then he goes into this, literally like it's bullet points of what love is. And he says this, love always protects, always trusts, always hopes, always perseveres. Love always protects, always trusts, always hopes, always perseveres. And when you look at that list, it's like, well, it's a cool list, you know. But as you read that and you kind of glance through that, it's very quick to go through. But there's one in there that doesn't fit. There's one in there that should stand out for all of us. Because I can always protect a relationship, right? My love can protect something. I can go around and I can protect whatever it is, protect from harm, protect from the things that are going around us. I can persevere. I mean, there's going to be ups and downs in a relationship, right? I mean, there's always going to be ups and downs. I can persevere through this. Love always hopes, right? I can always hope in things better. But this one, love always trusts. That's the one that stands out. Because that is not dependent on the other person in the relationship. It's dependent on me. It's dependent on the lovee, the person who is making the decisions. It's not dependent on both of us. It's dependent on me. That's the one that stands out in this. And love always trusts literally means believes everything. That love would default to trust. That it defaults to trust every single time. And what's interesting is that this is a keystone habit for happy couples. It's what they do and what they know in this. To illustrate this, I want to come over here a little bit. Each and every one of us, we have relationships, right? No matter what relationship you're in. Whether it be a marriage, you're engaged, you're dating, you're living together, whatever that relationship is, maybe you're just friends. Whatever relationship you're in, there are a whole bunch of things that we have in our lives, and we've called these expectations, right? You have some things. Well, you said you were going to do these things. She said she was going to do these things. We have some ideas about what our expectations are. And then the other thing we have in our relationships is our experience. It's the things that actually happen to us, right? Well, you said you were going to do this, but I experienced something else. We have some expectations, and we have some experiences, right? Some things that go on in our lives. And in every relationship, there is a gap in the middle between what we expect and what we get to experience. There is a gap. In every single relationship, there is a gap between what we expect to happen and what we experience. Well, you said you were going to do that, but you never came through. You said you were going to be home at 5, but you came home at 9. You know, there's some things that I expect in this relationship, and there's some things that I experience. And the thing that's interesting about this gap is you and I get to choose what goes in this gap. And we can choose to either believe the best, We can choose to believe the idea that, hey, I don't know why he's late again. I don't know why she didn't do what I asked her to do. But I'm sure she's got a great explanation. I'm sure he's got a great explanation. When I have all the facts, until then, I'm just going to believe the best. I'm just going to believe that what is going on is that I'm just going to assume the best. I'm going to believe the best. The other option for us is that we assume the worst. Right? Before they've even phoned, before they've even come, they've done it again. I am so mad right now. It doesn't matter how many times, how many flowers he buys. Like he's done it again, and I'm assuming the worst. Like he's just done it. I expected some things. There was this gap, and I experienced some things, and it's just I've had enough. Like I'm done. I'm mad at him. I don't know what's going on. But happy couples know that there is a gap in the middle. Okay, they know that there is a gap between what they expect and what they experience, and happy couples know that every single time they're going to believe the best. They're going to choose to believe the best in the gap in the middle here. And I'm going to come back to this a couple of times over the course of the next couple of minutes. But every time there's a gap, I just wanted you to focus on this again. Every time there's a gap, I expected some things to happen, right? He said, she said, he was going to do this, she was going to do this. She never did this. They didn't come through. They didn't follow through with what they said. When there's a gap between what we expect and what we experience, happy couples know that they have a choice, and they choose to believe the best. Now, you're sitting here this morning, you're not into the whole religion thing. You may be like, yeah, that's a cool idea. That's a nice illustration with some little stands and stuff, But this Paul guy, Paul's such a hypocrite. He was killing Christians, and then he's like planting churches. Like, what's up with that, right? Or maybe you're kind of like, this whole Jesus thing, I'm still not sure about the whole thing. I'm kind of like, I don't know if I want to get, all in there. So how can I believe what you're saying, Morgan? Like, how can I believe what Paul says? Well, funny enough, in 2005, this man named Marcus Buckingham published a book, and I'll put this up here. The One Thing You Need to Know by Marcus Buckingham. It's a leadership book. It's a business book. It's about getting better as a leader. You can certainly go and buy that and get better as a leader, a better manager. And he cites in there a study that happened over 20 years that kind of proves our point. He goes down and he says, right, there's a study, and these people went out and they studied happy couples for over 20 years, and they did it in Europe and the US and Canada, all over the place. And they tried to decide, hey, what was the common denominator? What was the common denominator amongst these couples that allowed them to be happy? Now, when I talk about a happy couple, I'm not talking about, the couple that grits their teeth and is like, I'm just going to get through this relationship until the kid's out of school. I can't afford to split up because, we need the dual income. We need to be in this. I can't afford to be apart from you. Or we're just staying together for the kids. So it's not about that, okay? It's about happy couples that have, gone through that. They've become empty nesters. They're living a happy life down the line. They're still enjoying marriage. That is something that is acceptable and loving towards them. They're enjoying what is going on in their lives. So that's what I'm talking about, happy couples. And they were trying to figure out, hey, what's the common denominator? And wouldn't you want to know the answer to that? Anybody want to know the answer to that? I should have charged admission for today. This is just great advice, right? It's just helpful, right? As you can imagine, these researchers, they started off and they had this assumption. They assumed that for happy couples, that over time, what was going to happen is that these couples were going to downgrade their expectations that they had of the other person. That they were going to downgrade the expectations that they had with, results to their virtues, their character. Maybe it relates to their motives that they were going, and they were going to say, hey, I'm going to, he's not as great as, I thought he was. She's not as great as I thought she was, but that's okay. I'm just going to downgrade my expectations of what's going on. I'm going to have a more realistic view of what this person is in my life. And what's interesting is that their study showed the exact opposite. The exact opposite. What they did is they went out and they got couples, found happy couples, and they stood the test of time, and they're going out and they gave them a survey, and they said, right, you rate yourself on a whole bunch of things, and then you rate your partner on a whole bunch of things. Rate yourself and rate your partner. And what was interesting is that happy couples rated each other more positively in every quality than they rated themselves. Every quality. They rated the other person, their partners, much higher than those partners rated themselves. Which is interesting because they ended up giving they almost unrealistically, they gave an unrealistically positive view of their partners, right? That I sat down and, I think I'm doing in this area, I think I'm doing a 4, and Kelly comes along and she says, well, I'm doing a 6. I hope that's true. But, I don't think I'm doing so well in this, but Kelly comes along and she grades me much higher than I think of myself. right? They had an unrealistic positive view of their partners. And what's interesting is one of the summations from the study was that, in fact, love is in fact blind. That they were blind to the deficiencies or blind to these things that were wrong with their partner. They were blind to these things. They had created this unrealistically positive view. And it created what the authors of the book call this upward spiral of love. Kind of sounds weird, I know, but that's the word they use. And this is kind of how it works out, okay? So there's this illusion that they're greater than they think that they are themselves. And this love creates this illusion, okay? And so the illusion created conviction. That yes, they really are greater than I think they are, or they think of themselves. That there's conviction that this is in fact true. And that conviction led to security, that because they're greater than they think they are, well, I can feel security in this. Like I'm feeling like I'm secure in this relationship. Security fostered trust, right? And what is intimacy? Intimacy is a high level of trust that I can, in fact, trust all of who I am to you, that I don't feel like you're going to manipulate or abuse me in that relationship. That security fostered intimacy. And then intimacy ultimately fostered love. And then what did the love do? The love then generated the illusion that created the conviction. The conviction led to security. The security fostered intimacy. And intimacy fostered love. And so up and up and up it went. And it just kept building and building and building. It just kept going. There was this upward spiral of love, and it just kept going along. That's what happy couples got to experience because of this. And the authors come out and they have a recommendation from this study, and the recommendation is this: you need to find the most generous explanation for each other's behaviors and believe it. Find the most generous explanation for each other's behavior and then believe it. Again, coming back to this thing, every time there's a gap in between what you expected and what you experienced, hey, you're going to find the most generous explanation for what they did, and you're going to believe the best, right? That there was some expectations I had, there were things that I wanted to happen, I experienced something completely different, and I'm going to choose the most generous explanation to put in the middle, that I'm going to, in fact, believe the best. To which you might say, well, Morgan, it kind of feels like Dorothy in The Wizard of Oz, the happy red slippers, the ruby red slippers, like I'm just going to click my heels together and, read the Bible because I've had this in front of me the whole time. The truth is, yes, you have. You have had it in a Bible on a nightstand somewhere. Maybe it needs to be dusted off. But you've had this truth in your house maybe. You've had this truth in the Bible the whole time. But someone maybe has never explained it to you in this way. You've had this there the entire time. And I'm not completely naive to this, okay? I don't think that this is, foolproof. I mean, there are some obstacles to this. You've got to get over some obstacles to be able to achieve this. And there are two obstacles, really, that I'll talk about in just a little bit. But every time there's a gap, okay? Every time there's a gap between what I experience, what I expect in a relationship and what I experience, every time there's a gap, you get to decide what you put in the middle here. It's up to you. It's not up to the other person. They've done their thing. You get to decide what you place in the middle here. And you can either assume the worst or you can believe the best. It's a choice. It's a choice that you have ultimately made. You have decided what to put in the middle when there is a gap. So the two obstacles to this really are this, that one is what we experience. Right? We experience some things in our lives, right? We experience some things in relationships. We carry some things from a relationship to another relationship. We have experienced some things. And the second obstacle is this, that who we are. You see, we don't come to a relationship just as a blank slate. We bring a whole bunch of stuff. Not only do we bring our hopes, dreams, and desires, as we've been looking at over the last couple of weeks, we bring our history, right? We bring our baggage. We bring a whole bunch of fear. We bring a whole bunch of insecurities. And what happens to us is who we are. There are certain behaviors we have that trigger specific responses in our lives. Maybe you started dating, you remember this from dating. You kind of did something, and your spouse or your partner, the person you're dating, just like flips out. And it's like, where did that come from? Like, what was that? It's because they have fear, they have insecurity, they have baggage, they have history. And a specific trigger, a specific thing is triggering what is that certain behavior, that they're responding a certain way in their life. But what's interesting is it's still a choice every single time. You have a choice, and I have a choice, what we put in the gap every single time. To kind of just dive in a little bit deeper here, I'm going to take this moment to dive a little deeper. Do you know that suspicion is a self-fulfilling prophecy? Did you know that? That if you're in a relationship and there is suspicion in the relationship, like I'm always watching for you to do something wrong. I'm always watching. I know you're going to mess up at some point. I'm watching what's going on. I'm keeping a tally. You're going to have to give some evidence to a jury at some point. I am watching what you are doing. Do you know that if you live in a suspicious relationship, if you're just living inside of that suspicious relationship? Do you know that you, as the person who is handing the suspicion over someone else, do you know that you're setting a trap for them to fall into? And do you know that they're going to fall into that trap every single time? Because when you're looking for something, you are going to find something. So suspicion, if you're in a relationship that has suspicion in it, suspicion is a self-fulfilling prophecy every single time, because all you're doing is you're setting the stage, you're setting a trap, and someone is ultimately going to fall into that. But it's so much easier to be able to look at the other person, right? It's so much easier to be able to say, well, it was his problem, it was his fault, he needs to sort that out, she needs to sort that out. It's so much easier than looking at ourselves, looking on the inside. And that's one of Paul's points. You see, the truth is you and I, we have a choice of what we put in the middle. So with all that in mind, let's go back to that verse. It's a little tricky, and we're going to unpack it just a little bit. We're going to spend a couple of minutes there as we wrap up today. Here's what Paul says. He says, love does not delight in evil, but rejoices with the truth. You know what that means? That love is not trying to catch the other person out. That they're not building a case towards something. You said this, you did this. You said this, you did this. I'm not building a case. I'm not trying to find you doing something wrong. I'm not watching you all the time. I'm not keeping a scorecard of, you got this right, you got that wrong, that little black book. I don't have one of those, okay? I'm not keeping that. That's what love does. Love always protects. It always protects the relationship from suspicion. It protects the relationship from going down a negative path. It's protective over the relationship. Love always trusts that I'm going to believe all things. And I love what Marcus Buckingham says. Find the most generous explanation. I'm going to sit down and I'm going to think about the most generous explanation to what is going on right now. And I'm going to believe it. The most generous explanation. Love, it always hopes. It trends positive. Yes, there's going to be things in your relationship that you can doubt. You can go down the negative spiral. But no, I'm going to trend positive. I'm going to focus on what is in fact good. I'm going to move in that direction. And then love always perseveres as well. That perseverance implies resistance. Perseverance implies resistance. There may be doubt in this relationship. There may be doubt about what's actually going on. But hey, if I'm going to love you, I'm going to be determined to trust anyway. So the question I have for you today is this. Do you believe the best or do you assume the worst? If you think about who you are, how you're wired, how you grew up, the relationships that you've had up until this point, the things that have gone on in your life, the person that you are, do you believe the best or do you assume the worst? Because it's a choice. And the truth is, it's your choice every single time. But Morgan, he said this, and then he ended up doing this. No, she said this, and I understand that. But it's always a choice. And it's always your choice. It's your choice every single time. It's not dependent on the other person. It's your choice every single time. And you might still be resisting this, and you're like, well, Morgan, surely there are other options to this. I don't necessarily believe you fully here. Surely there's some other options. I'll tell you what the other options are. And I don't think that the other options are certainly going to move your relationship forward. Okay, these are the other options that you have. You can delight in uncovering mistakes. You can thrive on speculation. You can assume the worst. Or you can embrace doubt. And I want you to imagine just for a moment that you were sitting down with your kids. Maybe you don't have kids yet, your future kids. Maybe your kids are getting older and they're getting married. You're sitting down with your kids and they ask you, hey, can you give me some advice of how I'm going to have a happy relationship? Are you going to tell them these things? Are you going to say to them, honey, you've got to lay a trap, and then you've got to stand by and watch as they do all these things and keep a record of wrongs. They're going to have to stand in front of a jury at some point. You're going to have to make sure that you're writing all these things down. No one's going to do that. No one wants to live like that. The truth is, you and I have a choice. It's a habit, and it's a keystone habit for what happy couples do. That whenever there is a gap between what we experience, what we expect, and what we experience, that we put believing the best in the middle. We believe the best. And so your homework for this week is, I just want you to try this for a week. It doesn't matter if you get it 9 times out of 10. Hey, the point is you need to try this, okay? It's not about knowing this. It's about applying this in your life. And so just for a week, I want you to just try and do this for a week. I want you to choose to trust. I want you to choose to trust. When there's a gap between what you expected and what you experienced, I'm going to choose to trust. I'm going to come up with the most generous explanation, and I'm going to choose to trust. Because trust equals acceptance. If you want to be accepted by me, right, you need to trust me. You need to know that I trust you. And vice versa. Trust equals acceptance. We thrive on trust. We thrive as people on acceptance. But just choose to trust. You don't have to get it right every time. No one can really get that right. But just choose to trust. Every time you want to go down that path, oh, no, he's done it again. He's done it 9 times out of 10. But this 10th time, there better be a good reason because I'm done. No, choose to trust. Find the most generous explanation and go down that way. Now, am I saying that you shouldn't have difficult conversations? Absolutely not. If this has happened, 15 times, 10 times, 5 times, I don't know what the limit is for you. If this keeps happening, yes, have the difficult conversation and sort it out. But the moment you're finished with that difficult conversation, move on. Get right back to this and choose to trust every single time. Because this is what happy couples do. Happy couples know that believing the best is a keystone habit. And it is a choice. Happy couples know it is the best choice. It is the happy choice. And it's what happy couples know. Now, you're sitting here today, and you've maybe heard me say this, or you've heard someone say this before, but I certainly believe, and there are a lot of people here who believe, that following Jesus will make your life better and make you better at life. And I certainly think that following Jesus is ultimately going to make you better at relationships. Because it's going to lead you to be living a more selfless life. At the heart of Christianity is this man named Jesus, and he gets sent. He's the Son of God. He gets sent to earth, and he lives a selfless life. He does the most selfless thing imaginable for you and for me. He pays for your sins, and he pays for my sins. And it is an invitation from God to each and every one of us that we would do for others that God, through Christ, has done ultimately for us. That we receive what we did not deserve, and we are to pass on to others what they do not deserve as well. We are to choose to trust them, even though they may let us down. God did that for us. God does that for us. And we're able to offer that to other people as well. And so as much as I hope after today that your relationships will improve because of what we've spoken about over the last 4 weeks, as much as I hope that, my ultimate agenda, my ultimate goal is that you would at some point make the decision to follow Jesus, because it is the decision you will never regret, and it is the decision that will enrich every single one of your relationships. Let me pray for us. Father God, thank you again for the opportunity to be able to talk about these things. Father, that you've preserved ancient texts for generations, that we are able to sit here and read from some wisdom, that Paul wasn't necessarily making up something new, that he was just applying what your Son told us to do, which was to go and love the people around us the way that you, through your Son Jesus, have loved each and every one of us. And Father, I pray today that we would have the wisdom to know what to do and the courage to ultimately do it. But Father, I pray today, specifically for the person who's here, who, Father God, their spouse is not here, their partner's not here, and they might never be here. They might never darken the door of a church. They might never walk in here. Father, they might never listen to this message. They might never watch this. Father God, I pray that you would give this person the unique slice of wisdom that they need to be able to live this out. That ultimately their partner, their spouse, the other person in that relationship might see the difference in their life and might be inquisitive about what's going on. Father, that you would help them have a happy relationship. Father God, thank you for your Son. Thank you for what you did for each and every one of us. Thank you for the church that we get to gather en masse. Father God, we love you. We love your Son. And it's in his name we pray. Amen.